Good morning, good afternoon from London. I'm Magdalena Renderschap, and on behalf of Westminster Foundation for Democracy, I would like to welcome all of you to today's event dedicated to the role of Ukrainian Parliament in transformational reconstruction and recovery. For those who don't know, Westminster Foundation for Democracy is the UK public body dedicated to strengthening democracy around the world. WFD has been engaging with Ukraine for decades, and our work with the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has continued uninterrupted since 2016. WFD is proud to stand by Ukraine to protect its democratic gains and consolidate reforms as it continues to withstand Russian aggression and embarks on the EU accession process. Today, we are honored to be joined by esteemed members of Ukrainian Parliament, Ukrainian organizations and individuals, and international partners and donors. I'm particularly grateful to all of you joining from Ukraine after another night of Russian brutal attacks. The event will spotlight the key findings from our newly launched report, the gender impact of the Russian full-scale invasion on the priorities of Ukrainian MPs, funded through grant in aid from the British Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. After the presentation, the event will feature a panel discussion with esteemed members of Ukrainian Parliament and CSO representatives. Throughout the event, there will be plenty of opportunities to ask questions and interact with guests. Before we formally open the event, I have a few technical announcements. The event is held in English and Ukrainian. Please go to a globe icon to select the interpretation right language for you. To submit questions, please use question and answer icon. Please also remember that this event is recorded. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Anthony Smith, Chief Executive of Westminster Foundation for Democracy, to open the event.
Thank you very much, Magdalena. My name is Anthony Smith. As Magdalena said, I am the Chief Executive of Westminster Foundation for Democracy, and I have the honor to open this event. As Magdalena said, we as an organization have been engaged with Ukraine for more than 10 years, partnering in particular with the Verkhovna Rada. And one of the things that we have recognized in our work in Ukraine is that while Ukraine has been changing and deepening its own politics, it has also been transforming politics in the rest of Europe. And of course, one way that they are doing that is in demonstrating what leadership looks like in responding to the Russian aggression. But Ukraine is also transforming our understanding of what political and social leadership looks like in building a democratic political system. We see that in the dignity which Ukrainian society continues to demonstrate in the face of attacks and provocations. We see it also in the determination and bravery that the Verkhovna Rada continues to show in carrying out its duties in wartime. And we see it in this report, which illustrates, in my mind, how political leaders maintain their core values when facing pressures that most of us in the rest of Europe cannot imagine. Maintaining and strengthening our values will be critical as all of us work to reverse the decline in democratic governance around the world. So the things that we can learn from Ukraine will be lessons for all of us. I want to thank all of those that contributed to this report, and I look forward to the opportunity of further support to and learning from our friends and colleagues, both in the Verkhovna Rada, but also outside it. Together, they're helping to deepen Ukraine's democracy and to transform politics throughout Europe. Magdalena, thank you very much. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for this warm welcome. And I can see that Ms. Olena Shuliak, Honourable Member of Ukrainian Parliament from Sluga Narodu, is also on the call, and I would like her to invite her to open this event as well. Ms. Shuliak, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I am not sure you can see me. I hope you can hear me. I would like to sincerely thank all of you for the invitation. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to participate in the presentation of the report and the outcomes of the research. I would like to thank the Westminster Foundation for Democracy for their extremely important work to us in the Ukrainian parliament. This report is not just a practical benchmark for the parliamentarians, but it is also important to us in tracking the changes that occurred to us as both lawmakers and individuals who live in the reality of the war. The all-out war, the large-scale invasion by the Russian Federation, both forced us to revise our priorities towards diplomacy, security, and defense, but also catalyzed the rethinking, the revision of our approaches to our work. So now we've started to assess the importance and significance of institutional inclusion, gender equality, diversity, social cohesion. So we are now looking at all of those things from a new angle. This report and the underlying research shows that gender equality is a shared value to all of the MPs, irrespective of the party or group that we represent. At the same time, each and every of us might interpret the meaning of this equality differently. To some, it's the recognition of the role of women in the armed forces of Ukraine. To others, it is a need to make decisions based on certain values. To others still, it is about access to leadership and leadership positions. The MPs who participated in the survey expressed some concerns that gender quotas now might be circumvented in the very near elections that are to come when the war is over, because the society would be focusing more on security, on survival, and perhaps gender quotas would not be of high priority. So it is essential for us to make sure that we follow this legislative provision. Since those amendments were incorporated in the election code back in 2020. The enhancement of the women's right in political, economic, and even military life is important. On the other hand, we realize that gender stereotypes die hard. And as a result, we see that in post-war period, these stereotypes might be reinforced unless we take very special effort and put this effort into preventing such development of events. This report also raises the issue of protecting the rights of LGBTQ plus community. Unfortunately, these issues are not in the center, not even on the periphery of the parliamentary debate. And women veterans, veterans from the LGBTIQ plus community should be incorporated into this debate. And now we are working on a bill, or draft bill rather, that should start moving to the process of adoption. Now that we've got a change of government, now we will have to resubmit this draft bill to Verkhovna Rada again. And we should be aware that human rights should cover every citizen, every member of the society, and they should be defended meaningfully. So the new bill that will replace the previous one on the protection of LGBTQ plus rights will be more effective. All of us Ukrainians have felt the psychological effect and the burden, mental burden of this war. So we should also focus on social and psychological support to the younger people, to the veteran community, to all of Ukrainians. And it is essential that the voice of the civil society is very well pronounced in the report. So where Parliament has no time or capacity, then the civil society steps in to form the agenda and to support the local communities and women therein. So it will be but fair if the role of the civil society in the process of restoration and recovery is legislatively enshrined. So this report is a very good reflection of what we have now in the country, and it is a roadmap of sorts for us to move ahead. So we should take some of the findings of this report and translate them into legislation that would support gender equality, human dignity, and inclusion. Yet again, thank you, FW and the authors for this wonderful work. And I'm sure that this report will help us to shape a very fair society in post-war period. Thank you very much, and glory to Ukraine.
Ms. Olena Shuliak, thank you very much for this endorsement and warm words. I'm really pleased to hear that you think that this report can inform legislative initiatives in the Parliament. We are really delighted to hear that. Thank you once again. We could hear you perfectly well. We couldn't see you, but hopefully by the time we get to the presentation, to the debate, we can sort this out. And in the meantime, indeed, we would now like to move to presenting the key findings from our recent report, the gender impact of the Russian full-scale invasion on the priorities of Ukrainian MPs. They've witnessed firsthand how Russia's full-scale invasion has radically reshaped Ukraine's political landscape. Security and humanitarian needs have rightly taken certain stage. However, we wanted to go deeper and really understand how MPs are navigating this extremely difficult context, and how their political priorities, including on gender equality and inclusion, are evolving in ways that could not only rebuild, but truly transform the country. So this study offers a rare glimpse into MPs' shifting ambitions, fears, and hopes in the fourth year of the full-scale Russian aggression. It is clear, as just mentioned, as you could just hear, that the vision is bold, is people-centered, where there is a hope and expectation that the society will be rebuilt in an inclusive, gender-responsive, and transformative way, and will deliver for every Ukrainian person in all their diversities. WFD is really grateful to all Ukrainian MPs who amid sirens, blackouts, and uncertainty generously shared their time and insight to make this research possible. In a moment, I will hand over to a research team comprising of Heidi Riley, independent consultant and adjunct researcher of School of Politics and International Relations at the University College Dublin, Ksenia Oksamitna, reader International Politics, City St. George's, University of London, and Olena Sotnik, advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Justice of Ukraine. Really, it was a massive privilege to work with you. I'm really grateful for your dedication, time, and conflict-responsive research approaches. That was really crucial to get this research right. I would also like to thank all WFD colleagues who I am not able to list now, but who supported this research and made it possible, but especially my dear colleague, Halina Shevchuk, who for years led our office in Ukraine. And it's an honor to be working with you, Halina. So while you are listening to the presentation, please use Q&A channel to submit any questions, reflection. Please kindly write your name, association, and the question or comment. And in the meantime, I will share a link to the research page where you can read both researching full in Ukrainian and English, but also a brief policy in both languages. And now, Heidi, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Magdalena, and thank you to the previous speaker for such a wonderful introduction and reflection on the report. I'd also like to thank all of those involved in supporting the research team in working on this report, and particularly those MPs who gave their time under very difficult conditions to speak to Ksenia and Elena in the interview process in putting this research together. So just as a quick overview of the research itself, the findings that we present today are drawn from 19 interviews carried out with members of the Ukrainian Parliament. Interviewees included 12 women and 7 men, and respondents remain anonymous in the report. Within the interview sample, effort was made to ensure diversity in terms of party affiliation, age and region, and also length of time as an MP. We also drew on some secondary reports and opinion polls, which were particularly useful in comparing the positions of MPs with those of the general population. So the report itself, the findings are presented in 3 parts. The first examines how priorities of MPs have changed since Russia's full-scale invasion. The second looks at MP priorities for reconstruction and recovery. And the third examines how MPs have reassessed their role as MPs since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So our presentation today will follow the report structure. So I'll begin by presenting some of the findings in relation to shifting priorities. So before I kind of move to some of the findings that specifically look at priorities associated with gender equality and women's inclusion, I'd like to highlight some of the broader issues raised as of greatest priority, and others that were identified as becoming less prioritized. So I suppose inevitably, the greatest priority for all MPs remains around security and defence. But as well as the priority of, for example, securing military equipment and defence systems, MPs spoke the consistency of how the defence effort has strengthened a salient sense of national identity that has also led to greater prioritisation of cultural heritage and linguistic sovereignty. So in this context, many MPs spoke of the importance of the increase in the use of Ukrainian language and how debates on Ukrainian language now go unchallenged in Parliament, which was a shift from before the full-scale invasion. Other priorities that were discussed and identified relate to democratic consolidation, Euro-Atlantic alignment, specifically around NATO and EU accession, and additionally, adaptation of critical infrastructure to ensure delivery of education and health in a time of severe insecurity was noted as a key priority. Areas identified as deprioritised tended to relate to long-term initiatives in education, on the environment and in health, although the issue of mental health resources was a key priority identified by almost all respondents. MPs demonstrated an acute awareness of the psychological impact of the full-scale invasion on the population and recognised the need for significant resources in the long term on issues around mental health and psychosocial support. The last point mentioned on this slide is around LGBT rights, which was interesting as it was not an issue that was specifically asked in the questionnaire. But here, some MPs did bring up this issue, raising the point that more needs to be done to secure better equality in legislation, particularly with regard to legal recognition of civil partnership. And this is particularly important for those serving in the military, as it could regularise questions around medical care or estate for wounded or fallen LGBTI soldiers. However, it was also noted that there's still resistance to this issue in the military. But at the same time, looking at broader opinion polls, it seems that recognition that LGBTI individuals are also part of national defence has led to greater support for LGBTI rights generally, although homophobia still remains. So moving on to how gender equality was prioritised in the findings. Overall, parliamentarians were supportive of equality between women and men. However, understandings of the meaning of gender equality did differ between MPs. For some, gender equality was defined in terms of broader structural equality, but for others, evidence of increased gender equality since the full-scale invasion is demonstrated through the higher numbers of women in structures and public roles that were previously male-dominated. Most noted is the increase in women in the military. Also, through the fact that there are now more women MPs in high-profile positions, which was spoken about often as the root of which arguably stems from the 2019 election, in which 86 women were elected, and almost 50% increase in women's representation compared to the 2014 election. Others added that women have become more active in business since the full-scale invasion, with women being the most active in the use of government grants for new businesses. But there was also an acknowledgement that the full-scale invasion has also reinforced gender stereotypes. For example, the idea that women need to act as strong in a kind of masculine environment in order to participate in politics alongside men, and that women's association with childcare and the home persists. It was stressed by some women MPs that caring responsibilities have increased where they're mostly male partners are serving in the military, and this is coupled with reduced access to childcare facilities and the additional burden of looking after elderly parents. For one MP, it was felt that gender equality is an area that's difficult to achieve during the full-scale invasion, while others felt that another felt that Ukrainian society was not yet ready for full equality on the basis of society's lack of readiness to accept compulsory military service for women. Discussions on the level of gender equality in the military were also mixed, with some respondents discussing how women are better respected by their male counterparts, while others acknowledged that there is still some way to go, with one noting that relevant committees in Parliament had been slow to consider draft bills on increasing gender equality in the military. There was also some concern that gains made for women in Parliament in the 2019 election could be at risk if support for quotas becomes deprioritised or overshadowed by other priorities. Some warned of the return of efforts that had previously been at play in circumventing quotas, such as where parties can register for elections based on lists in full compliance with gender quotas, but with women as technical candidates, that can then refuse to run in the final days leading up to the election or fail to register after elected. The position is then taken up by a man instead. Another risk to maintaining women's positions in government was identified as being the travel restrictions, given that during the state of emergency, officials, including local councillors, are prohibited from leaving the country, apart from on official business or if they have a child under 18. And as a result, some women deputies have resigned from their positions as they preferred to have the possibility to travel and be with family. And this has created a gap in women's representation at the local level. Now, finally, one other significant inconsistency between respondents was their position on the Women, Peace and Security agenda, as there was variation in both knowledge of the agenda and associated resolutions, but also difference in positions on the sense of value or usefulness associated with the tools of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Now, this is an issue that is addressed both in part 1 of the report and also in part 2 on reconstruction and recovery, on the reconstruction and recovery process, which Ksenia is going to present. So I'm going to leave this discussion, the deeper discussion of the Women, Peace and Security agenda to Ksenia in the context of the reconstruction and recovery process. Ksenia, I'll pass over to you now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Heidi, for discussing the priorities and issues that have emerged during our research. And in my part, I would like to cover in more detail the visions of Ukrainian MPs for the reconstruction and recovery process. And at first, we were asking our interviewees about their visions for the role of the parliament in the process of reconstruction and recovery. And I think one of the areas of consensus was the importance of starting reconstruction and recovery already during the full-scale invasion. So some international partners were slightly reluctant to invest heavily in reconstruction and recovery while hostilities are ongoing. But among all interviewees, there was a widespread consensus that this process cannot wait until the end of the active phase of hostilities. It really should start now, while Ukraine is battling and withstanding the full-scale Russian aggression. In terms of the role of MPs in the planning for reconstruction and recovery, we have encountered a diversity of opinions. And some MPs wanted to see a greater engagement of the parliament in this planning process. Some MPs believed that the executive branch was leading the way, and they wanted to see that branch seeking greater input from MPs. And MPs also noted that personal relations between some MPs and members of the executive branch could allow greater ability to influence this process. So it kind of depended on the proximity of MPs to the executive branch. Some MPs also relate an impression that international partners and donors, such as the IMF, for example, actually were comfortable with an executive-led process of planning for reconstruction and recovery. In general, many MPs believed that the parliament could have had a greater voice in this process. At the same time, we also encountered divergent opinions, and some members of the parliament were quite comfortable with the oversight and kind of shaping role of the parliament in this process. So MPs did play an important role in terms of setting the legislative framework for reconstruction and recovery, controlling the executive branch, and building links with local authorities. So we have encountered a diversity of opinions about the engagement of MPs in the process of planning for reconstruction and recovery. Now, in terms of sort of specific priorities, we have discussed already the Women, Peace and Security agenda, which is, of course, developed in the international context, in the UN context. And as Heidi has already mentioned, some MPs believed that this agenda was useful only in parts or not entirely relevant to the work of the Ukrainian parliament. Some expressed skepticism about the agenda because they were quite skeptical about the UN's ability to assist Ukraine in its national defense. The UN has faced challenges to its legitimacy in the eyes of Ukrainian public and Ukrainian policymakers due to its ineffectiveness at stopping Russian aggression. MPs were saying that the UN hasn't reacted strongly to various violations of men and women, civilian and military, prisoners of war. And they were saying that in general, the UN and Ukraine have slightly different approaches to dealing with the Russian aggression. Then another aspect of the Women, Peace and Security agenda is women's inclusion in potential peace negotiations. And here again, some MPs were saying that having Ukrainian women negotiators face Russian negotiators might not be effective from Ukraine's perspective, considering the deeply patriarchal and conservative values in Russia. So Ukrainian women negotiators might not have so much credibility in the eyes of Russian counterparts. So here again, this aspect of the agenda was not seen as entirely relevant to the Ukrainian context. Some MPs were saying that, of course, gender equality is hugely important, but it's not the first priority as compared to the task of national survival. And even those MPs who were working very actively on the issue of gender equality were saying that indeed our first task right now is to preserve Ukraine as a nation, is to defend our civilians, is to decrease the losses among our military personnel, and then of course we can talk about gender equality. Some MPs were saying that Women, Peace and Security agenda is a useful tool, especially for NGOs at the local level who are very active in implementing the agenda but might lack resources to do so. Besides gender equality, another salient issue that emerged during the research was the needs of the veterans. And of course, veteran population in Ukraine is increasing and will increase as the resistance continues. In terms of the inclusion of veterans, many MPs were saying that veterans should be given opportunities to gain new skills, new abilities and resources to remain active participants of Ukraine's economy and the labor market. Many MPs were mentioning the interest in running businesses among veterans and the increasing number of veteran-run businesses and the role of the state in providing skills and grants to enable that resumption of business activity by veterans. Some veterans, of course, would prefer to stay in the military and they might move to other roles in the military, such as training and advising. And those of them who want to remain in the military should be given opportunities to do so. Of course, psychosocial support in the general context of mental health discussions is also very important. And it could prevent various tragic incidents that may happen as a result of veterans' wartime experiences. At the same time, many MPs were imagining the figure of a man as a veteran, while it's also very important to recognize that many women also serve and they will also be veterans. Many of them are already veterans, and they should also be provided with opportunities and recognition. In terms of veterans' political participation, for the future, some MPs envisioned the possibility of a veteran-based political party or a party around one of the units of the armed forces of Ukraine that already have their own distinct identity. So that could be used for developing a political project as well. In general, political participation by veterans was seen as an important element of national resistance because people who defended Ukraine obviously have commitment, skills, and networks to continue the resistance and to continue building Ukraine as a political nation that is, capable of withstanding foreign aggression and capable of engaging in comprehensive transformations. And now I would like to hand over to Olena, who will speak about the changing roles of a member of parliament during the full-scale invasion.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your interest. And of course, to my colleagues that we made it possible. I think it's very important also to give a little bit of understanding what is happening with very important in terms of democracy, but also representative of interest of Ukrainian citizens, Parliament of Ukraine. And I think we had a lot of insightful responses. Sometimes even, I would say they've been very opposite to each other, but generally speaking, in terms of the MP's role during the full-scale invasion, that was probably one of the first our questions which we asked during the interviews, because we believe that that's completely frame the whole activity and their priority and motivation. And I think that the most important that all the members of the parliament mentioned, and it doesn't matter if it's women or men, that despite the threat to their lives and of course not just general threats, but because they're politicians and they're working on behalf of the state, their priorities were very in line with their roles of MPs, and they continue function as members of the parliament despite all these threats. And a lot of MPs in Ukraine, they have their own offices where they have receptions and meet with them. Meet with the citizens, but all these offices, they became just volunteers hubs or different places where internally displaced people or people who lost their houses or people who just needed support, humanitarian support or medical support or something like that, they could find this help, especially on the especially on the first days of the large-scale invasion. Lately, can somebody please turn off the micro? Thank you. Lately, these offices, they became more focused initiatives, which helps, for example, to the wives of the soldiers to find the way how to support their families, or, for example, as centers of professional trainings for those who lost their jobs or have to move to another cities and they are looking for new jobs. So it's mainly hubs of support for Ukrainian citizens. And of course, the majority of the members of the parliament told us that generally the national defense and priority of the national security decrease existing divisions among the members of the parliament, political parties, and generally political views, because like parliament was and still focused on the victory and helping Ukraine to go and Ukrainians to go through these difficult times. And also, it's very important to mention that members of the parliament they highlighted their role during the national resistance, which continues, and they said that, of course, mainly their work focused on defense or international affairs, international relations, advocating for support of Ukraine, advocating for military support, sanctions, justice, etc., etc. And in many aspects, it brought to the disappearance of like politics and sometimes a lack of activity in other areas from their side. Of course, they have a lot of challenges in terms of their role as either members of the parliament who are males and who are females, because with males, with male members of the parliament, they mainly mentioned the dilemma of the service, like military personnel versus parliamentary, and with the women, female MPs, it was more family safety versus like their motivation to work as a member of the parliament. And of course, many of them they've been mentioning that it was like really hard, especially for those whose families have to leave from the country, and they have to stay here, and because of the many restrictions and lack of possibility to visit their family and to support and to see them personally. And from the mental point of view, the point of view of emotional, of course, stability, especially for female MPs, the first like months of large-scale invasion was the most difficult. And one more thing, which is also important to mention, that they all highlighted some kind of antagonism towards officials, and many of them explain this antagonism with slow path of the like regular reforms, which of course Ukrainian society expects, but at the same time, due to the state of emergency and martial law, many of them they are like naturally blocked, and of course it's very hard to communicate to the society why it is it is kind of slow down in this path of many reforms in the country. Even though I think that generally speaking, many members of the parliament, they mentioned that, for example, Euro integration was recognized as a priority, and many reforms which links to the Euro integration path, they had like a green light and speed process in the parliament. And of course, we drafted and summarized this report with some recommendations, and you can find them on the last slide of our presentation, but also in the executive summary and also final part of our presentation. But mainly, it connects to the of course gender equality, and we suggest to find the way how to advance and fund reforms for gender equality, of course reinforce parliamentary oversight to support transformation impact of recovery programs, also enhance formal mechanism for civil society engagements, and advance gender equality and transformation and inclusion by, of course, continuation to support women's political participation, mainstreaming their agenda, women and security across parliament, and ensure that veteran policies are holistic and transformative. And also we stress that it is very important to invest in social resilience and mental health by scaling up gender-sensitive psychological support and preventing post-war violence and social fragmentation. And last but not least, it's very important to recognize and to institutionalize wartime gains and honor and make visible women's contribution to national defense and recovery, and advance LGBT rights through some legislative guarantees and reforms. But in general, to finalize it and to conclude, I think that what is very important to mention that there is a clear understanding in the parliament, within different fractions, within different political parties, importance of the role of gender equality, importance of the role of equal participation in all important reforms, and of course further reconstruction of the country. I think what is important here to highlight that we still and the parliament also in somehow emergency mode because of the continuation of large-scale invasion, and situation is not becoming better. I would even say it's becoming harder, because after 3 years of large-scale invasion, generally society is exhausted, and the members of the parliament, they are not in exclusion, and that should be kind of the also focus how to support and to help this very important institution in our democratic architecture to find the way and to find the motivation after already 6 years of their mandate to have a clear path, to have a focus, and still to prioritize important for the society reforms. And with this, I will finalize my remarks. And one more time, thanks to my partners in this research. It was a great journey. It was a great opportunity for many, many insights, which was, I think, important not just for ourselves, but hopefully for members of the parliament, but also for society to better understanding of the situation inside the parliament and probably better inclusion and support. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this comprehensive overview. And I shared in a chat channel link to the reports that are available in Ukrainian and English, full reports and policy briefs. Dear researchers, we have a couple of questions in the Q&A channel. I believe you can see that from James Sayer. The one question was, I think it was Heidi, when you were presenting your part, the question was whether there was any recognition that martial law only applied to males of certain age and was not gender equal. If so, why was it applied when women have vital roles to play in the armed forces? I'm wondering whether either of you, Heidi, Ksenia, and Olena, whether that was something that was discussed during the interview. That's the first question. We can't quite hear you.
Sorry, I was my unmute button was behind the chat there. Sorry, I'll maybe just make a couple of points and maybe pass across to the Ksenia and Olena who carried out the interviews, who may be able to respond more deeply on this. But I suppose in terms of martial law being defined as unequal, I don't think that was explicitly spoken about, but certainly the kind of masculinization of conscription was spoken about somewhat. But I think what we highlight in the report is that voluntary conscription from women was particularly high, and although it wasn't, shall we say, imposed, but there was a recognition by MPs that women's participation in the military and willingness to participate in national defence was particularly high. Ksenia, maybe I'll pass across to you on that.
Yeah, of course. This is a very good question, and indeed, one of the MPs was discussing gender equality in terms of gender equal draft. And they were saying that Ukrainian society might not be ready to have this conversation, but again, we don't know how it evolves in the future. And indeed, many women have volunteered to serve in the armed forces of Ukraine, and many women support the defense effort in other ways as members of civil society, as members of local and national public bodies. And of course, in Ukraine, there are some questions about the draft. And for example, one of the controversial issues is the age at which men are drafted. Right now it's 25, and many international partners are asking Ukrainian authorities why this draft is not compulsory from 18 years old onwards, at least for males. And I think the rationale that the Ukrainian government has is their willingness to protect Ukrainian families. So younger men are not drafted in a compulsory manner yet because the government wants them to start families. And this might be one of the reasons why women are also not drafted in a compulsory manner at the moment. But of course, those discussions about equitable draft in terms of age and gender are happening, and we'll see how they evolve.
Excellent, thank you very much. And maybe one last question also from James, really interesting around the diasporas of Ukrainians living abroad and how they're being encouraged and supported to go back to Ukraine. I'm just wondering whether that's been also discussed with you during your interviews.
Maybe I can quickly respond on that. First of all, we had limited time of interviews and a lot of questions, so this one wasn't like really asked, but some of MPs mentioned that, but mainly in terms of the support of diaspora, support of those who've been like displaced, have to move to another countries because of the safety issues, that like they're trying to keep contacts with them, to involve them into the different kind of advocacy campaigns, and that many of them actively support different humanitarian but also political campaigns in different countries, even after like 3 years of large-scale invasion, and there are like more deeper integration to this society. They have connection to Ukraine, but still the question of their coming back to Ukraine is more question of, first of all, security and safety for their families.
Wonderful. Thank you again for the presentation and for the questions. And now we are moving to another part of our event, which is a discussion. And I would like to invite MP Olena Shuliak, member of the Ukrainian Parliament from Sluga Narodu, political party chair and the devolution committee chair. Welcome again. MP Helena Tretyakova, member of the Parliament from Sluga Narodu, political faction and social policy and protection of veterans' committee chair. Again, welcome. MP Irina Gerashchenko, member of Ukrainian Parliament from European Solidarity political faction, member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Interparliamentary Cooperation, MP Alexei Shmerentensky, member of Ukrainian Parliament from Sluga Narodu political faction, member of the Verkhovna Rada Anti-Corruption Committee. We also had a representative of the CSO, but I can't see Maria anymore on the call. So let me check in the background whether she just lost the internet connection, and the debate will be, the discussion will be chaired by my colleague, Chris Levick, who is our Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia. And before that, I can see MP Irina Gerashchenko having her hand raised. Oh, I think maybe we have lost her. In that case, Chris, over to you.
Magdalena, thank you, and thank you to all of our panelists and presenters so far. It's been an interesting discussion, and particularly to have my thanks to Heidi, Ksenia and Olena, the authors of the report, but all those also who contributed their time and their experiences in providing their input into the research. And finally, to my WFD colleagues, Magdalena and Helena in particular, but also to the rest of our Ukraine team for spearheading this work. And to further discuss this and the findings and the relevance of the report, I'm pleased to be joined by various panelists from across the Parliament and from Ukrainian civil society who've just been introduced. We'll have some time for questions at the end of this session, so I please encourage people to use the Q&A function in the seminar room, and we'll go through those as we come through. But 12 panelists, I intend to ask each of you for some introductory thoughts on the research and what you've heard so far. And then I have a specific question for each of you. But to begin, can I invite your reflections on what we've heard, but also what it means to you to to build back better, and what are the specific outcomes that you're working to in this regard? And if I may, we'll begin with Olena Shulak, and then we'll turn to Elena Gelushenko after that. So Olena, please, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will wait. Shall we give the floor to Irina Gerashenko first, because she raised her hand first?
That's
okay?
fine, please, Irina.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elena. I'm Irina Gerashenko. Not only am I an MP, but I'm also a co-chair of a political party, European Solidarity. Back in 2007, we set up the caucus, Equal Opportunities in Parliament. We only had 11% of women in Parliament at that time. And it wasn't only about numbers, but about impact on decision-making. And the key issue for Ukraine was that women didn't have any impact on decision making, any contribution thereto, and they were presented only symbolically on leadership positions. So for all this period, for all these years, I've tried to contribute to changing the situation. Thank you very much for your research, for the presentation. The report is important and significant, but I would say that we do have the necessary legislation and policies in Ukraine when it comes to gender equality and inclusion. But the problem is implementation, which is exacerbated by martial law, which impacts adversely the protection of human rights in general and rights of women in particular. I will give you several examples. In your presentation, you spoke about the ban for the women who are elected representatives at the local level, or women who work in local communities, say in districts, in municipalities. They cannot go abroad. They cannot go and see their families, their children. We've raised this issue several times at meetings with the then Prime Minister Shmyhal and with other ministers. All of the political parties have this issue whereby local representatives or women who work for local communities refuse to be members of their parties so that they can go abroad to their families. When we met with Ms. Yulia Sviridenko, the new prime minister, I asked her about this ban and whether the new government is planning to lift this ban. She said that it was the first time that she'd heard about this issue and about this governmental resolution. Perhaps she was too busy doing other things, but it is strange that the former vice prime minister and the current prime minister should be unaware of certain provisions that impact so notably hundreds and perhaps thousands of women. There's another issue that has not been reflected in your report, even though it is important for the role of women in post-war recovery, is the concentration of power, particularly in the sector of security and defense. We've got the so-called Security and Defense Committee. This is a very narrow circle of decision makers in the field of security and defense, but there's not a single woman sitting on that committee. So I'm not a theoretician when it comes to, say, peacemaking. I've been a special envoy of the president for peaceful settlement, and I met lots of women who were very proactive in peace building efforts and in peacemaking efforts. But unfortunately today, the peaceful negotiation process, no matter how difficult and thorny it is, no matter how non-responsive the Russian delegation is, we still have to think about women's representation in the Ukrainian delegation. We don't expect the Russian Federation to include women, but Ms. Sotnik is right. This factor is undervalued, underestimated as a potential contribution of women into peacemaking processes. Now we've got 60,000 women in the armed forces, 5,000 at the battlefield. So when you say that mobilization or conscription for women is voluntary, that is true. But those women who are conscriptable, even though they are not conscripted right now, they cannot go abroad, you will know. And one more factor that has not yet been reflected in your research, it's about combat medics. More than half of those are women, medics or paramedics. Most commonly, these are doctors or paramedics of totally civilian professions like pediatricians or therapeutic experts or say surgeons, and their contribution to the saving of the military lives is essential, and that should be paid more attention, I believe, particularly when it comes to providing them with mental health services and this social protection upon demobilization. So when it comes to certain legislative initiatives, then the protection of combat medics, men and women alike, should be in the focus of parliamentarians, I believe. And one more thing, and I will conclude there without taking too much of your time. We have got a parliament with the largest share of women in the Ukrainian history, 21%. Olena and Galina Tretiakova both chair parliamentary committees. That's great. But oftentimes the leading positions are of a nominal nature and they don't have sufficient impact on decision-making in parliament, which is not that related to lack of gender equality, but to lack of agency in parliament at large. So I hope that women would be more proactive and more insistent, more decisive in protecting their leadership roles. So summing up, the society is prepared to give more role and more agency to women, including women parliamentarians. At the same time, gender equality and inclusion is shifted to the further end because of the war. And I would say that both powers that be and media seem to overlook the women's role. Women should be actively engaged in peacemaking processes, and if we don't want to lose this leadership role in post-war Ukraine, we should cancel this governmental resolution on banning exit for women representatives at the local level. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your thoughts and your constructive challenges, Ashana. I was particularly struck on your point of policy versus implementation, as well as the points you make around women's roles in the negotiations and moving forward in leadership. And perhaps we can return to those later in this discussion. Olena, please can I invite your thoughts and reflections, and then I'll turn to Alexei.
Thank you very much for giving the floor to me again. Back in May, the Federation of Employers of Ukraine, together with the Employment Service of Ukraine, represented a large survey on the situation and the labor market in Ukraine. And they spoke about one trend that has not been reflected in this very report, and we in Parliament pay little attention to this trend as well. So amongst 70% of surveyed jobless people, 80% were women. So when we looked at the expectations of the businesses and the expectations of jobless people, we saw that their expectations are very similar. Businesses are prepared to offer salaries that jobless women expect to get. But there was one thing that makes their positions different. Women don't want to work full time. And most of the women who responded to this survey said that they cannot work for 8 hours a day. Whereas businesses, employers would like them to work full time. And when we delved deeper into the reasons, it transpired that most of those women have their husbands at the front line conscripted, and they have to stay with their children. They have to take care of their families. And it also turned out that the infrastructure that is available to them for ensuring this caretaking has been reduced in capacity and does not meet the needs of those women because of insecurity or lack of safety. Some kindergartens, for example, don't have shelters, so women cannot risk the lives and health of their children. Sometimes they had to resettle, so they don't have their extended family members next to them, living next to them, so that they could take care of their children. So they have to take care of their families themselves. And I think these women who are focused on their families and their children, even though they would volunteer to be active in political or civil life or social life, they are limited in their capacity because of this lack of infrastructure facilities and lack of services that they badly need. So I think we have to actively discuss this issue at the local level in communities while they are planning their reconstruction and recovery plans. Now, the Parliament has restored such an instrument as empowering communities to develop their own local democracy tools to engage more actively young people and IDPs, veteran communities, women communities, etc. But when recovery is being planned at the local level, the local authorities should analyze the needs of women to inform such plans. And I think that unless we address these basic needs for dozens of thousands of women, we won't be able to expect women to develop as leaders, as active representatives at the local level or in public service or in civil service. So, because as I said, their basic needs, not their personal, but those of their families, are not yet met. Another thing that I would like to underscore, and it has been highlighted in the report, there are lots of categories of people who are not properly seen, who seem to be invisible to decision makers. Over the last 2 years, we've contributed to the veteran sports activities. And we've catered to more than 2,500 veterans. We've never seen women amongst those veterans, which means that women veterans do not feature in such movements, such initiatives, or such organizations. Now, women in the military are not visible in the media, in the social media, and in the public domain. So we have to highlight their positive experience, their heroic deeds, if you wish. They can be used as role model for other women, lots of young women. And LGBTQ plus community are invisible as well, even though there are hundreds of defenders that represent this community at the front line. But the society still pretends there are no such defenders, there are no such community in general in this country. So we can speak about various categories of the population who seem to be invisible, still invisible. Now we have started to discuss the needs of IDPs more actively, because they are members of the host communities, but legally they've been considered as such only since the beginning of this year. And again, that limits their access to basic services and their access to active participation in the community life. So, of course, we can adopt lots of laws making it mandatory for everyone to participate actively in decision-making at the local or regional level. But we need to make sure that they can be implemented. And we have to encourage the media, the civil society to speak about those categories of the population, to embrace them in their activities and to highlight their very important role. When it comes to elections and gender quotas, we understand that in the post-war time, the specialized law will be adopted on post-war elections, and this gender quota should be preserved and protected. We've got certain statistical data according to which 40% of women were in the candidates lists during the last elections. But now we see that many women were used as the look ahead, so to say, as quote unquote technical candidates when no one meant to have them elected indeed. So we should think of certain safeguards against such approaches so that no woman candidate should be seen as, again, quote unquote technical. So we will focus on that once it comes to drafting and adopting the post-war election legislation. Thank you very much again for your research. It is very important. It is very timely, I should say, because it allows us to look at what we are doing from a different angle. And we see that there are lots of vulnerable categories that still need protection.
Olena, thank you for your thoughts, your reflections, particularly making that linkage between availability of services, fulfilling needs, and enabling leadership. That's a really important point for all of us, but also for all your other reflections around unemployment, role modeling, and other issues as well. Thank you for your participation. Can I turn the floor now to Alexei Zemenensky for your thoughts, please? The floor is yours, Alexei.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I will speak in Ukrainian as well. That would be more convenient to me. Thank you. First of all, I would like to highlight the risks that we are facing. Now with the change of the presidential administration in the USA, now the the ultra-right movements started to raise their heads, hoping that anti-corruption, gender equality policies will be held back, will be turned a blind eye to. So it is thus extremely important for us to make sure that all of the gains of the recent years should retain support at the level of embassies, rep offices, missions, European Parliament and European country parliament, national parliaments. So those revanchist forces are looking for any opportunity to call back reforms, to remove certain provisions from the laws with shady amendments that would actually neutralize the positive effect of the recent reforms. So we call on you also to support us in this, so that there would be no inspiration with this new agenda for the return on the way of reforms. Now, not only do we have more women at the positions of the committee heads, but also we have the Prime Minister, the ministers who are women. And in the process of reconstruction and recovery, Olena Shkrum, who is a former colleague, is now in charge of reconstruction in the Ministry of Economy. And the Budget Committee of our Parliament also has a woman as a co-chair. So I've got very positive expectations as far as our reconstruction effort and also engagement of women therein is concerned. But we have to be more specific. We have to learn more from international best practices on how to take the gender perspective into account when we plan recovery. How can that be achieved in practice when it comes to allocation of funds, engaging women in planning? That is not evident for most of the civil servants and representatives of the society. What does it mean as gender mainstreaming in the process of reconstruction and recovery? We need more detail. We need more practical examples. And when it comes to risks, I would also like to draw your attention to foresight and scenario analysis. I am a co-chair of the Equal Opportunities Caucus mentioned by Irina Hiroshenko. I am also a co-chair of Strategic Foresight Caucus, and we have had two studies so far, one with the UK Parliament and one with the International Renaissance Foundation on the potential risks of post-war recovery. So the future is not evident. The future can be very varied, and it might have various scenarios in store for us. So we should consider best case scenarios and worst case scenarios and the whole range in between. So we also should analyze those scenarios from the standpoint of their impact on gender and inclusion. So our success hinges to a great extent on our success in European integration, on assistance by opinion leaders, by our European partners, and their support on our Euro integration trajectory. A lot of decisions made by Ukrainian lawmakers and government members were made as part of our commitments within European integration. And it is in the process of the European integration that our country, as well as a lot of countries before us, carried out reforms as part of their integration. It is essential to support these dynamics so that we could avoid disillusionment and frustration when people feel that European integration is a very far prospect which is almost unreachable, then frustration and disillusionment can set in. And one more thing, a positive thing. As a member of parliament that represents my constituency, local constituency, I talk to the employers in my constituency a lot, and I see that a lot of investment was made in re-equipment of various workplaces, and that enabled women to work even in physically, say, physically challenging positions, right? Because again, we lack men in such positions who men are currently at the battlefield. So women can be employed at a broad range of professions and occupations, and thanks to automation, mechanization, they can do that. So we should also promote these new jobs amongst women, and we should encourage employers to engage more women. Thank you.
Alexei, many thanks for your thoughts, and particularly that application of a risk lens, and many things we all need to be aware of here. And thank you in particular for ending on a positive note. That's always great to hear. And thank you for your contribution. I'm afraid the clock is against us, and we don't have time for the questions. But with that, to thank all of our panelists, and I will hand over to my colleague Shannon O'Connell to wrap us up.
Thank you, Chris, very much. And thank you to our skilled researchers for this excellent report, and also to all of the members of Parliament who participated. I think both the remarks and the stage setting that Magdalena offered from the beginning makes it very clear that there is no such thing as a normal workday in Ukraine, and there hasn't been for a very long time. So taking the time to participate in a research project like this is greatly appreciated. It also helps the rest of us learn in a way that Ukraine has always done. Ukraine is a very unique case study in the journey to democracy. It is a country and a society that has had an extraordinary dialogue about what it wants over the past 3 decades. And that journey was, again, profoundly disrupted by the full-scale invasion and the aggression of Russia. So now what we saw in both this research report and the very live and dynamic contributions from our members of parliament, thank you for that, is the extent to which policy is trying to respond to the needs of the Ukrainian people. And the members of parliament are doing everything they can to pay attention to what's going on the ground in people's lives, to the bigger geopolitical pictures and dynamics, and how those integrate into that. And also trying to take care of their families and plan for the future as well. Excuse me, this is my Ukrainian fan cat. She doesn't listen to anyone. The piece that really stood out for me in this conversation is the extent to which the robustness of the policies that are being considered now, how important that is. And that comes with robustness of representation. And a lot of that has to do with who is present in the room. There is a lot of evidence that makes it very clear that the more diverse and genuinely diverse political representation is, the better the policy outcomes for the whole of society. That there's a better consideration of some of the factors that were represented here in this panel about underrepresented communities, long-term risks, long-term investments, and managing what needs to happen now with what needs to happen in the medium term and the longer term. And it is that uniqueness of experience that often comes with the way we divide society, the economy, and the military by gender terms that will be a very important part of what comes next for Ukraine. The concerns about sometimes the conversations about balancing this anticipates a tension that rarely emerges. And certainly the level of thoughtful leadership that we've seen in Ukraine is a very nice demonstration of what can happen when there is a convergence of leadership. There's a stepping up of leadership to deal with the challenges of a multi-layered crisis. So I want to recognize WFD's team on the ground, who has been there for decades and has always been responsive to the needs of our partners in the parliament, civil society, and political parties. To thank again the research team for their work to help us understand what our partners need next. To all of those who are working to support Ukraine, and a very special thanks to the members of parliament who contributed to this piece of research. We will do everything that we can to support your important work, and we thank you for sharing these lessons. These will be helpful for other MPs and legislators and policymakers around the world who learn every day from Ukraine, as we all do. And thank you, Magdalena, for your leadership on this project. Slava Ukraini. And thank you everyone for joining. Have a good day.